Hello, AP Government 2021. Thank you for joining me today. Here's today's lecture on the infamous United States Supreme Court case Schneck versus the United States. Over the course of this lecture, there are 4 core topics that will be discussed: World War I background, Schneck case background, the official Supreme Court ruling on the case, and the impact it has had on the United States. Well then, let's get straight to it. First off, topic number 1. Some background on World War I. World War I began in 1914 after the assassination of the Archduke Ferdinand of Austria. This set off a massive world war that raged on for 4 years. It was the Ottoman Empire, Bulgaria, Austria-Hungary, and Germany, known as the Central Powers, who were pitted against the United States, France, Italy, Russia, Great Britain, Romania, and Japan, known as the Allied Powers. This war continued to rage on until 1918, when the Allied Powers eventually won. In an effort to save the country in the midst of the First World War, the United States passed an important few laws that still impact the United States law today. In 1917, after joining the war, the United States passed the Selective Service Act under President Woodrow Wilson. The Selective Service Act was passed due to the shortage of recruits and volunteers for military service, so the government took it upon themselves to gain new soldiers to fight the war. The most significant of these laws was passed in 1917 in an effort to secure the national security of the United States, the Espionage Act. This act was passed, which made it illegal to spread or obtain any sensitive information regarding the United States' national security, especially with specific intent to harm the United States and its security. This act made tampering with U.S. military recruiting illegal. Charles T. Schneck was a member of the United States Socialist Party. He was a known political activist who had taken a particular disliking to the war draft, in which men were forced into serving the United States in the war. Charles Schneck and Elizabeth Baer were caught dispersing pamphlets that were intended towards the men that had been included in the Selective Service Act, encouraging them not to participate and heed the enforced war draft. It is important to note that there was absolutely no violence encouraged within the pamphlets. Schneck's reasoning behind his massive disfavor of the Selective Service Act was due to the fact that he believed it violated the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment was passed and ratified in 1865, which made any form of slavery and or involuntary servitude illegal. Charles Schneck believed that by forcing men into military service, this was violating the 13th Amendment and the right to be free of any unwanted servitude. Here's a photo of Charles Schneck, just to put a face to the name. Charles Schneck and Elizabeth Baer were both charged under the violation of the 1917 Espionage Act, as they were both attempting to tamper with the government's World War I military recruiting tactics and enforcement. By asking draft men not to participate, they were endangering national security. This case brought forth a lot of questions from people and landed right at the doorstep of the United States Supreme Court. Did the Espionage Act violate the First Amendment? Did Schneck violate the Espionage Act? Did Schneck violate the First Amendment? Were there any restrictions on the First Amendment? Was the Espionage Act legal? These questions would very soon be answered by the Supreme Court judges. The Supreme Court is the highest judiciary in the United States. The court is composed of 9 total judges who make decisions based on the United States Constitution. The judges that were in charge of deciding the fate of Charles Schneck were Justice Oliver Holmes, Jr., Justice Edward White, Justice Malone Pitney, Justice Willis Van Devanter, Justice Joseph McKenna, Justice William Day, Justice John Clark, Justice Louis Brandeis, and Justice James McReynolds. These justices would come together to vote on a case that would change American history forever. When the Schneck case made its way to the Supreme Court in January 1919, there were immediately major implications towards the future of the First Amendment. The judges who were actively ruling on the case had made their decisions unanimously, with no dissenting judges or opinions. Due to the concerns and questions of the public, the majority opinion, spoken and led by Justice Oliver Holmes, Jr., was that the Espionage Act did not violate the First Amendment. The justices also made a point that the United States has greater right to regulate and control the populace, especially in regard to free speech in times of war, than in times of peace. So they created the clear and present danger test. The majority opinion agreed that free speech is not a consistent right of the public populace and varies based on the type of speech that is used. Speech that incites or implies violence, speech that indicates a violent overtaking of the government, and speech causing public panic, such as yelling fire in a movie theater, are speech not protected under the freedom of expression in the First Amendment. There were no dissenting judges or opinions, and the case was unanimous. In an effort to determine dangerous speech, the clear and present danger test was created to evaluate the immediate danger of speech that may potentially cause damage to national security, and such speech is not speech that is protected under the First Amendment. Another positive impact of Schneck for the United States is that there were now official restrictions on speech, protecting the greater populace from dangers of the public. Justice Holmes gave the infamous example of yelling fire in a movie theater. Dangerous speech and speech inciting public panic are not acceptable, saving individuals from dangerous situations and people. Thank you all so much for joining me today. I hope you learned some valuable information in this lecture on Schneck versus the United States. But unfortunately for you, it's not quite over yet. Quiz. A matching game on this lecture at the link provided. When finished, please email me screenshots of the finished game at 175560@lausd.k12.ca.us.